All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
Funny how? I mean, funny like I'm a clown, I amuse you?
Come on, it'll be just like in the movies. We'll pretend to be someone else.
That's all you have to do!
Danny, don't plan too much. It may not come out right.
We've got to return some videotapes.
Perfect.
Howdy, y'all, and welcome to the third episode of the Cinema Enigma podcast. We are a podcast where we take films we love, take films we hate, we wrap around them, we deconstruct them, pull them apart, break them under ice to find out what makes them tick. I am one of your co-hosts, George Ray, and I'm always joined by this fella here.
Philip Hauser.
So we are episode 3. We are officially in our Revenge of the Sith level tier of podcast episodes. I think that's something to be excited about. I don't know about you, but Revenge of the Sith was the best of the prequel, the only kind of good one out of the prequel trilogy. So I think that's something exciting. I don't know about you, but that's just, yeah.
Best of the worst. I like it. Best of the worst.
Best of the fucking worst. Let's get into it. So, I done did it. I risked it all. I went into a theater, threw caution to the wind, and I saw The Tenet. Or Tenet. Tenet, not Tenant.
Is that
The Tenet?
Okay. Oh, the new Chris Nolan movie? I saw the trailer for that.
Nolan. The most important director ever, because he wants you to risk and throw caution to the wind to see his movie, because he only makes the best, most epic movies. And so, yeah, I saw it, and I unfortunately didn't like it very much. I thought it was very incomprehensible and very Christopher Nolan-y, and not in a good way. Everything you come to expect in a Christopher Nolan movie, and I just felt like I know what the fuck was going on, and it was kind of a shit show. It had some interesting set pieces, but ultimately I found little to connect to compared to his other films like the Dark Knight trilogy, Memento, and things like that. So yes, unfortunately, I'm sad to say it's not a movie to risk your health to go see. Not that it was a big risk, because I had the entire row to myself, and there were hardly anyone in my theater. So it wasn't like a big risk, but definitely one that I don't think is this grandiose project that's going to save movie theaters, because ultimately I think you could just enjoy it just as much on your streaming services or the small screen. I don't know, but I just felt like it wasn't that great. I was kind of disappointed because I was looking forward to it, but yeah.
The only thing I can say is that I did see the trailer, and my first thought was it was like Christopher Nolan's like thought of like what would happen if the main character from Memento started World War III, and that's basically the movie. Because I mean, it's about time travel, isn't it? Or like memories or something.
It's kind of hard to explain. Not really about memories. It takes place in what they call the Twilight world, which is kind of a dumb name, especially after the Twilight movies. And so it's like a world where like time is a little elusive. Things kind of happen in forward and reverse. It's kind of hard. Like it didn't do a very good job of explaining its premise. It's just you kind of have to just roll with it. And there's so many exposition dumps that go like a mile a minute, and it's yeah. I mean, my biggest problem with it was it wasn't well executed. It was all over the place, and it didn't really give you much room to breathe or soak in. So I do think the concept is interesting, but I also feel that he just didn't do a very good job of presenting it, and that's kind of the biggest disappointment for me. But it's basically the super secret espionage spy organization, and they're trying to stop World War III, I guess. And Kenneth Branagh is the bad guy, but he's not very like threatening. Like I was never like on the edge of my seat. I was just kind of like, okay, yeah. Yeah. Okay. So this is what happened. This is what's happening now, and this is this is what's happening now. Okay, I kind of get it, but not really. Maybe it's just too smart for me. Maybe Christopher Nolan's just over my head. But I think at the end of the day, you should at least try to make your film entertaining and digestible. And I'm always like ragging on general audiences for liking the Marvel movies and Star Wars and all that crap, but this is just too much and not in an enjoyable way. Because I like confusing films. Like I've said in the past on this podcast, I'm a big David Lynch fan, and he's the king of confusing movies. But I kind of grasped what was happening, but at the same time, not really, because it's just not. It's presented in a very clunky way, and I just couldn't hold on to any of the characters. John David Washington's really great. Robert Pattinson's pretty good, but other than that, I just couldn't. I had nothing to hold on to. It's like I'm trying, Mr. Nolan, but you're making it difficult for me to enjoy your film. So.
Well, that's too bad, because honestly, that was like the only movie that I saw the trailers for that seemed halfway interesting. And now that Dune is being moved to like the following year, it's like, yeah, they've they've delayed it until the middle of next year. So we're not going to see Dune. I'm not going to see Dune. It's kind of like, honestly, like when you think about it, it kind of goes to show that I really think we're kind of going through a transitional period right now. And it's like we're not like really like the future of movies, I think, are now just going to be like consumed at home. And it seems like now with like coronavirus and all that stuff, it's like it's like very hard for me to like imagine like theaters like becoming a regular thing in like the consumer strip mall landscape of what we call America, because it's like everything is like going to Disney Plus or Amazon or Netflix, and I'm sure for a lot of, and like you said, it was like completely empty, even though they did like I guess they put you through like a sanitizer spray airlock to get inside.
Not really. I was kind of yeah.
Oh, not even that. Okay.
They didn't even have like. They had hand sanitizer, but it wasn't very well like advertised throughout the theater. Yeah. I had to look around to find it. I feel fine though. I don't have any symptoms. It was a little over a week ago now, and I wasn't going in with super high expectations. I was kind of excited for it because of the trailer, and I do like Christopher Nolan. I wasn't crazy about Dunkirk, but I did like Interstellar, and I thought Inception was pretty good. And I love Memento is one of my favorite films. I don't think he'll ever be able to top Memento for me, honestly. I feel like he's just trying to go big, and I feel like sometimes you got to scale yourself back and kind of challenge yourself, because really it's the same kind of scale you've come to expect with a Nolan film, and that kind of comes at the cost of character and a interesting way to present your story. So
yeah, I'd be curious to see like what like movies this year how movies do this year at the box office, because if it's not, if films are just not doing well right now, they might just move it to streaming.
They should, honestly. I feel like right now it's just an unfortunate circumstance we're in, but we're in it. We need to be patient and just understanding, and you can either hold off from releasing your film, or you can release it on a streaming service. Amazon's like charging $20 to rent like a new release, or Disney Plus is charging $30 to kind of rent and own Mulan, even though like ticket prices, at least for us, and we're from Austin, Texas, and ticket prices are like maybe $10 to $15 range at most, maybe not even $15, and It's just, I mean, I don't agree with that kind of aspect of overcharging for these new releases that look pretty mediocre. I mean, they did it with the Judd Apatow film, The King of Staten Island, and there's this Jon Stewart film called, I don't even know what it's called. I don't know. It's got Steve Carell and Rose Byrne. It's some stupid comedy it's Irresistible or something. I don't know. But it's just, I don't know. I feel like it's just price gouging for really movies that shouldn't be $20. I mean, if you're owning it, that's fine. But to just rent it, I feel that's kind of bullshit. That's just me, though.
Yeah, well, I remember Jeff Bezos trying to get $20 out of me because I wanted to watch the new Invisible Man movie, and I was just like, that's not worth it. I could just wait. I could probably wait for the DVD to trickle down into like the secondhand market somewhere.
Oh yeah, and Invisible Man just I don't know. It doesn't. That always looks kind of. It's a Blumhouse movie. If you're familiar with Blumhouse, I mean they do some good stuff. They did like Get Out, which is pretty good, but mostly, I mean, they're just, I don't know. They do stuff like Unfriended and kind of just schlocky generic horror. So I don't know. The Invisible Man doesn't look that great to me, honestly. I feel like it's trying to be a more serious kind of epic film than it actually is from what I've seen. I've seen reviews and read about it, so I don't think it's for me. That's just me though.
Well, I mean, that's such a bummer.
It's sad, but I mean, honestly, movie theaters are kind of on their way out even before the pandemic. I mean, let's be honest, because they weren't doing as well unless it's like a Disney film or a Nolan film or a Tarantino film. And I mean, some good films still come out. It's just like the really great ones don't get that much distribution. They're in theaters for like a day and then they go away. So you really got to kind of try to catch them on the big screen while you can. But honestly, if not 50% of theaters, at least are going to be probably shut down before this whole thing is over, if it ever ends, I feel. So I think pushing back films is probably the best way to go, unless, if they're really hoping that theaters will be able to make a comeback after this. But I think releasing it during this mess is just kind of a shit show, honestly.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see probably within the next 5 years, what that whole industry is going to look like.
Oh, yeah.
Because if it's all going to go to streaming, that's probably going to shake up, like, how you budget a film. And, that's probably going to affect everybody. So I'm wondering if maybe we will just get kind of like the small, like Blumhouse type movie studios, and then you'll just have like big conglomerates like Disney and Universal and those guys. And
yeah, they got Jurassic Park and the Monster Cinematic Universe that's kind of dead right now. That kind of died with the Mummy, but
they're gonna bring it back. They're gonna reboot it.
Yeah, they'll reboot it again. Okay.
They're going to try it again. It's just like, all right, okay, Monster Cinematic Universe, we're bringing back the ants. We're bringing back the ants from the movie They. That's going to be that's going to be how they reboot the franchise.
Yeah, or, I don't know what's happening to that Angelina Jolie Bride of Frankenstein project. I think it was like filmed, but they're shelving it or something because they're probably embarrassed by it.
Well,
It's probably not good.
Her playing Bride of Frankenstein, that's pretty on point. So, I mean, hey, that might be the one that works out. But I thought the whole Monster Cinematic Universe thing was kind of dumb to begin with.
Yeah.
It's like I didn't have to see a single one of them to know that it was going to be bad, and I was proven right. So,
did you see The Mummy with Tom Cruise? I never saw it, but
no, but I was very, very curious because I'm a huge fan of the Brendan Fraser Mummy movies.
Yeah.
But really honestly, Tom Cruise, he's only good at doing Mission Impossible films. And those, for someone who's like big on like spy films, those have seen a rate of diminishing returns since like the third one, I think.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. I think the last one was pretty successful. I didn't see it, but apparently it's one of the best action films ever.
That's Rogue
some
State, right? Rogue State or
No.
Ghost Protocol?
I think it was Fallout.
Oh, wow.
Because it has a lot of crazy stunts, and it's a running joke that Tom Cruise is trying to kill himself by doing all these crazy stunts. But hey, I mean, if he enjoys that rush, I say go for it.
He's got.
I don't know. I mean, I love the Tom Cruise that would do like kind of more art like, high art films like Eyes Wide Shut and Magnolia. Of course, he's not doing anything like that anymore, it seems, unfortunately. He could be a good actor with a great director, but I feel like he's found his shtick, and that's doing franchise films like the Mission Impossible films, and he's got the sequel of Top Gun, which I'm sure has been delayed like 30 years later.
Man.
He's doing Top Gun, or more than 30 years. That's 86. Yeah, so.
Well, since he's doing all of his own stunts now, he's probably just doing it because he thinks like Scientology has removed all the Thetans, so he's got superpowers. He's just like, don't worry, I can jump out of this plane without a parachute. Watch me do it.
Yeah. He goes for it. His thing is he always wants to entertain the audience, so I respect that.
Yeah.
Despite how much shit, I mean, I'm definitely not for Scientology or really any religion. I'm kind of non-religious by choice and nature, and I don't really believe in all that gobbledygook. Sorry for people offended by that or not, but Scientology is definitely one of the more out there ones.
Yeah, I will say
sure.
this, like with Tom Cruise, like ever since I read Going Clear, that's kind of changed my view of him. But I think in like you said, honestly, he's like great at his job, and as long as he's just kind of doing what he's doing, like you said. So I mean, more power to him. I don't.
So you mentioned that you were kind of excited for Dune, even though it's pushed back. Have you read like the Dune books? Are you pretty big in that? I guess that book series.
I read the first one. I kind of after the first one though, it kind of felt like a lot like Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And I had started reading Dune kind of right around the time I had finished the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and it was just kind of like, I will say this, like, say what you will about, I mean, the books are pretty good, but Peter Jackson does a really good job with those films. I mean...
Oh, yeah.
And really that's, and I mean, to be fair, there weren't a whole lot of people who had read Tolkien before the movies had come out, and I was one of those people who found out after like the first film that it was like based on a series of books, so that's when I started to get into that. And by the time I was finished with the 3 books, it was just like they were really satisfying, but they were definitely a slog to get through.
Yeah,
because books written like back in like the 50s and the 60s, it was like kind of like the exposition for like how those worlds, like the world building, it was just kind of like the movie equivalent of the guy who kind of shows up and it's just like, here's everything that's happening, and we're gonna take like a fifth of the film to like talk to you about it. And with Dune, it was just like there's a whole lore, there's a whole like history that spans like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, and it's like you're kind of going through, you're basically reading like the equivalent of like a history textbook. At least that's what Dune kind of feels like. You're reading part of a historical document, and then you're getting into the actual meat and potatoes of the story. And, you know, it's the same with Lord of the Rings. It's the same with Dune. After the first Dune book, I didn't really go for the sequels because it kind of gets, from what I understand from some of the people who've, like, read the other books, it gets a little crazy with God Emperor stuff. And, you know, it kind of, and I was just sort of like, all right, I've read the first one, so I don't really need to go for the other stuff, because the first book kind of ties a decent enough bow on the top to where you don't really have to you don't really have to read the sequels if you don't want to, which is nice.
I mean, it definitely, I could never get through. I tried to get through Dune. It just, I don't know, it just was a little too heady for me. And Lord of the Rings, kind of the same thing. I just the way they present it in the text, I guess, was just a little over my head. Who knows? You know, I could be maybe more open-minded about it if I tried to read them today. I mean, I love the Lord of the Rings films, and Peter Jackson just did a brilliant job at adapting those. And I'm more excited for Dune as a Denis Villeneuve fan. He's the director who's helming that project. He also did films like Blade Runner 2049, Prisoners, Arrival, and Enemy, among other films. He's a brilliant filmmaker. He's one of my favorite contemporary filmmakers out there. So I'm kind of interested to see how he wants to take it on as a fan of his work. And so I'm definitely, even though I'm not that excited about like the source material, I really feel that he'll do something really amazing with it. And from the trailer, it looks really intense and very interesting. So
yeah, I'm kind of I'm kind of excited because I was a huge fan of Blade Runner 2049. So,
oh yeah, same year.
Yeah, so when when I saw his name on there, I was just like, okay, he's probably, you know, I'm kind of hoping he gives it the Peter Jackson treatment where he kind of elevates the text.
Oh yeah.
So, you know, because I think with I feel like now more than ever, it's like when people think of Lord of the Rings, they think of the movies.
True.
It's kind of, I mean, it's kind of bad to say, but I mean, the Lord of the Rings books have kind of faded into obscurity with the success of the films, for better or worse. But honestly, most people who liked the movies and went to read most of the people who liked the movies eventually got around to reading the books, and like those too. So honestly, you know, that's not really a huge loss to the like the book world.
Well, I think you definitely probably have some hardcore Tolkien fans who swear by the books and probably, you know, rub their noses in the movies or like look down on the movies as not as inferior to the source material, which is fine. You're always going to have people like that.
I've only met like maybe one person who still liked the books more than the movies.
Yeah.
I mean, although, like, when he made the case, it was basically the fact that Peter Jackson took liberties with the source material and he, like, changed up. You know, like, the battle for Helm's Deep in the film is, like, completely different from the book. Although I've read, reading the Twin Towers, I mean, you're not... It's like, it's not... You're kind of getting the same amount of, like, tension that you're getting in the book. I mean, it's just sort of like the setting. If I remember correctly, like, the battle for Helm's Deep is, like, half of the Fellowship gets, like, driven into the caves while the rest is holed up in the castle. So there's, like, a fight in the caves, and then there's a fight in the castle. Whereas, like, in the movie, like, everyone's held up in the castle. And you kind of have that big reveal with Gandalf at the end. So it's just like small kind of, I mean, there's like small aspects that kind of got moved and changed around, and that's probably the subject of a whole new podcast, to be honest. So
we should cover the Lord of the Rings trilogy at some point. I love the Two Towers. That's my favorite of the three, and the Battle of Helm's Deep is just one of my favorite like action set pieces of any film. I think it's an amazing sequence, even more than the stuff in Return of the King. I like Return of the King, but Two Towers has like a lot of tension and a lot of interesting character arcs and directions. And I just love stories kind of in the middle where all is lost, you know, like Empire Strikes Back, and the middles of trilogies, you know, where like it's, you know, the darkest that the characters are facing. And it's just, I don't know, I find that kind of aspect very interesting, and that's why I think Two Towers is my favorite out of the three, especially when it comes to the extended editions, which, you know, you get like the Return of the King extended edition's like 4 hours long. So, but yeah, you're right, we should table some Lord of the Rings for a special episode somewhere down the line. I think that's definitely something really would be really interesting to get into for sure.
Yeah, since they're moving Dune to next year, I mean, you know, that would probably be the best time for it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you know, it's always a good time for the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I recently revisited them, and I still think it's my favorite trilogy, even more so than the original Star Wars trilogy. I feel like the Lord of the Rings trilogy just has a lot more going on, and it's a lot more consistent and everything. So, yeah, definitely love the Lord of the Rings trilogy, even though I haven't read the books. I'm one of those, you know, basic youngins who just like, I don't need to read, I'll just watch the movie. So
boom.
not that I'm saying don't read. I do like to read, just, you know, one day I'll pick up the Tolkien books.
I will. My favorite trilogy, George, my favorite trilogy is the Matrix trilogy.
Oh yeah,
that's right. I'll fight anybody in the streets.
There's some winners there.
That's right.
Especially the third one.
I'll fight anyone. I don't care. I'm serious. I'll fight you. I'll fight anybody. You know, for that trilogy. I don't care. We should visit the Matrix trilogy as well. I think that's I haven't seen the second and third one since they were in the theater for obvious reasons. But that's an interesting one. I wouldn't say it's like the worst trilogy. Like it, you know, I mean, there's like, when it comes to like Star Wars, that's just another entirely different kind of shit show. But the Matrix, you know, it's an interesting one for sure. But anyways, moving on to the main subject at hand, why don't we get into the topic of Nicolas Cage and Adaptation. But first, before we get into Adaptation, what has your experience with Nicolas Cage been like? What was your first film or performance you saw of Nicolas Cage, and what was your first impression of the guy? Since he's kind of a major force of nature in the film world. Okay, so like most millennials, my first exposure to Nicolas Cage was like on late night cable TV, on like FX or TNT. It was either Con Air or Face Off or The Rock.
Hell yeah.
And all of those movies, he just acted like a guy who was I couldn't really tell if he was a terrible actor or if he was just playing like some like really hammy like character role, but I just got the impression it's just like this like insane man who like screams and flails around and will just say like his lines like he's I don't know, it's like his acting like defies like explanation. It's like Nicolas Cage for me, he's like, if you want to see like a crazy man who's been like released from his cage and has been told like you're an actor, you're like, you've done Shakespeare, you've done Hamlet, you are you know, you're balls to the wall, you're absolutely insane, you're overrated, you're underrated, you've seen it all, you know, go nuts. And then Nicolas Cage was just like, yes, I am all those things. I will be those things. I will do that. And it's just like the crazy person's like version of like genius acting, like shown on screen. And it's like the yelling that he does, the lines that he delivers, like he's on, like he's waking up from like a Xanax like coma, or he'll just like sounds like he's about to have like a mental breakdown. It is like that is basically his performance, and that's what it feels like watching him and listening to him talk on film. And for me, like knowing like the insane Nicolas Cage, it was like such a switch to see him in the movie Adaptation, where he's actually playing someone who's like actually normal, and he has like he has like normal insecurities, and he's just like playing a regular guy. It was so like different to see him play someone that was like toned down. And that is kind of like, if I were to compare like how I've seen him in Con Air and The Rock and Face Off, and comparing him to his role in Adaptation, which I believe, didn't he win an Oscar, or that movie won an Oscar?
I think the film won a few Oscars. Chris Cooper won for Best Supporting Actor. I think Meryl Streep won for Best Actress. I'm not as sure about that one. Nicolas Cage was nominated, but he didn't win, unfortunately. I feel like that year his performance is really strong, and
it's just amazing though. It's just like, it makes me wonder just like why it's like he plays this like he plays like a totally different person, on film, where he's like incredibly crazy or incredibly boring. And this one, he like rides the line of being like a like decent, really good acting. And it's just wondering like what is up with you, man? It's just like, how are you in this movie when you've starred in like all these other ones? And it's just like, I'm getting like a totally different side to Nicolas Cage that I've never seen before. Except for maybe the closest I can think of off the top of my head was like Family Man. But he played in that movie like so boring. It was like almost unwatchable.
It was monotone Cage pretty much, which he seems to do a lot these days from his most of his newer films.
Yeah, like National Treasure.
When he direct to Netflix, kind of stuff.
Yeah, just like National Treasure, where he's just like, I'm gonna steal the Declaration of Independence, and he sounds
boom.
Like, it's just like he delivers it like a guy who's had like a 12-hour depression nap, and he's like been woken up, and he's just like, all right, I'm gonna steal the Declaration of Independence Day now. Bye, guys. And then you just get to him from like Face Off, where he's just like, I'm crazy. And it just really blows me away that not only is he like really awesome in Adaptation, but he plays as Charlie Kaufman and his twin Donald Kaufman. So he's playing two characters, and he's playing like both of them like totally different, which makes this film like really amazing. It just like, it really showcases that, he actually has talent. And I can't believe that this is the same guy who screamed in like a wicker basket of CGI bees in The Wicker Man.
Not the bees. No.
I know, the Scrooge's like, oh, my eyes, and
my eyes. Yeah,
I try to imagine like what the like director like told him, just pretend that you're being attacked by like a million bees, and like Nicolas Cage was just like, all right, I can do that, and then he just like goes like completely nuts.
Yeah, well, I think it's with any actor and the right director, he kind of, his performances can transform in so many different ways. I feel like with once in a blue moon, like Nicolas Cage will do a really great role. He'll do a really great project. Like there, it's like either like with Adaptation, or I think it's the Matchstick Men with Ridley Scott. I thought that was pretty good. I think that's the title. And recently with Mandy, I think that was a really good project for him, where he got to be kind of crazy, but also kind of emotes a little bit too. And so it's good. I think it's important for like a filmmaker to kind of reel him in, but you can't really cage Nicolas Cage. So I feel like all his quote unquote terrible, like crazy performances are just from the incompetencies of the director not being able to reel him in or control him, or kind of just make him, a little bit restrained. At this moment you can pull the crazy, but then pull it back. I feel like most of the time directors say just have fun with it. Or I feel maybe Nicolas Cage is kind of actor who doesn't really give a shit, and if it's just for like a paycheck, he'll just do whatever balls to the wall kind of performance that he feels like doing in the moment, whether it's Wicker Man or Face Off or Con Air. I feel like Face Off, that was kind of a dual role for him, but not in the best way. Like for him and John Travolta, I feel like it's just a superb masterclass of insane acting for sure. But yeah, it's just it's weird, man. It's weird.
Well, you know what? I'm ready to up the Cage factor. We're going to enter Cage-a-Lot Castle, and we're going to get into the adaptation before we get Bangkok Dangerous. What do you say?
Oh, yeah. Well, I also wanted to add my first experience with Nicolas Cage was in The Rock. That was the first film. I actually saw that in the theaters when I was a kid. And crazy, right? And that was my first experience. What I remember the most about my first experience, my first impression, was I kept focusing on his hairline for some reason. Even in the 90s, he had a bit of a hairline. And back then as a kid, I guess, because I worshipped, Stallone and Schwarzenegger and all the big action stars. And comes Nicolas Cage, who, for a period in the mid to late 90s, he was kind of in these films that took themselves way too seriously, and he was kind of, trying, or he was being an action star in those types of films, whether it's from Michael Bay or Jerry Bruckheimer or John Woo. You got your The Rock, Con Air, and Face Off, and Snake Eyes, and just so many weird performances. But I mean, I thought he had a very intense energy, and that's kind of my best way to describe his acting style, is his intensity and just the way he kind of just goes off in the performance. And it's very entertaining, and it kind of elevates a shitty movie into a hilariously bad or hilariously entertaining movie, I feel. So even if the film's not that great, like Face Off is just a ridiculous, so bad it's funny like film, and he gets to do so many different things in that. But then he's kind of just coasting now. I think he probably has a lot of back taxes. You mentioned Castle, and I feel like Nicolas Cage, I've read or seen that he like made a lot of bad investments. He like bought a castle, he bought an island, he bought so many different mansions. He's out of control. As much as his acting's out of control, I feel like his lifestyle is basically the same way. So, I mean, that kind of makes sense that he is kind of stuck doing these kind of mediocre movies that, if he's not acting like balls to the wall crazy, it's kind of just a boring performance. I haven't seen too many of his newer films, but I can imagine he's just kind of coasting on his once renowned fame, and now unfortunately, he's not looked on as a great actor, but more of just a brand or even a joke, maybe. I don't want to say joke, because I really love and respect the man, and I feel like he's entertained us. He's entertained so many people over the last like 30 years, so I feel that should be recognized for sure.
I mean, I would say for the island, that's probably where he buried all the DVD copies of Family Man, because I don't know who else watched it besides myself. and maybe my mom.
Yeah, I never saw it. I remember seeing the trailer for it. He's like a bad crook, but then a Christmas miracle happens and he's a family man. It's like, ooh, wow. Watch him try to be this dangerous criminal, try to be a family man. Ooh, he actually has a heart of gold. I mean, that's what the movie seemed like to me.
Yeah, I mean, he plays this like a Wall Street banker guy who like scams people.
Oh, okay.
And then it's like the whole like, this is what your life would have been like if you weren't like filthy rich. And no surprise,
if you were
and no surprise
a
he
family
hates
man.
it. So
yeah, seems about right. But yes, Nicolas Cage is an enigma. He is fascinating, and I feel like Adaptation is a good jumping off point because I really feel that is his best role for me. That's where I enjoy him the most because he's kind of emulating the persona or the personality of the great screenwriter Charlie Kaufman. Let's get into Charlie Kaufman for a moment. Are you familiar with any of his other works besides Adaptation? Have you seen like Being John Malkovich or Eternal Sunshine or Synecdoche, New York, or films of like that?
I have seen. I actually own Eternal Sunshine and Synecdoche, New York. Those are two like really big favorite films of mine. I watch both of those at least once a year.
Oh, nice.
And I think he also isn't he also behind the I'm Thinking of Ending Things movie?
Yeah.
That just came out, I think.
It came out on Netflix. That's definitely my favorite film of the year thus far. Not like there's a lot of competition, but it is a really great film. I would really highly recommend it. It's a lot more abstract than any of his other films. I have yet to see Synecdoche, New York, unfortunately. I'm ashamed to say, but I'm working on giving that a watch very soon. But from what I know of Synecdoche, New York, it's kind of a lot more in that vein. It's very abstract. The characters aren't like real in the sense of the traditional sense, but there's a lot of like venturing into the unknown with that film. It's very creepy and haunting, and it really hit home hard for me in terms of some of the implications the film presents. And when a film kind of connects to that with you emotionally in a very kind of haunting, existential way, I feel that those are the ones that kind of stick with you the most. So I'm thinking of Ending Things is definitely a new favorite of mine. I've watched it 3 or 4 times now, and I get something new every time I see it. And I think it's just amazing. I think Charlie Kaufman is definitely a very important writer and director and artist, and feel like I hope people are watching I'm Thinking of Ending Things, because I think it should do well so he can make more films and get more opportunities, because it seems like after Eternal Sunshine, he hasn't really been able to get projects off the ground, besides he had Synecdoche, New York. That was like 4 years after Eternal Sunshine. And he did Anomalisa, which was even longer after Synecdoche, New York. And now he's doing I'm Thinking of Ending Things. So it feels like he should have more opportunities than he gets, because I think he's just a brilliant writer and a true visionary. Not to boast the guy's ego, but I mean, I just think he's great. He seems like a very humble guy, and he's definitely one of my big inspirations in my life. And I think he's an amazing writer, and I think that's proven and very much exemplified in Adaptation.
Yeah, and I think also too, just like with Adaptation and Eternal and Synecdoche, like his movies are kind of the kind where it kind of rewards you if you're like doing multiple viewings of it.
Oh yeah,
because there's definitely so many. Because like you said, he puts in all this detail. A lot of it is. He is kind of one of those writer/filmmakers who he's got Easter eggs all over the place, and you have you kind of have the main story to kind of carry you along, but it kind of it does reward you to spot like all the little things that he has in his films, because it really fleshes out the characters more. You get a deeper understanding of the characters with every successive like viewing, and for me that's kind of what makes his movies a very rewarding experience. And up until like recently, I didn't even know he was behind all of these other films. I just thought that it was like just like a group of like just like a handful of directors behind all of these. But the fact that this is like one person, that's when it kind of clicked for me that this is like a very specific style, a very specific film aesthetic and storytelling that, you know, is like pure like Charlie Kaufman. So it was kind of cool. It was like, you know, it's like the whole idea, it's like multiple viewings and then you find out it's the same guy. It's like another Easter egg for me. So that was like even that tickled my you know, my funny bone a little bit. It was just like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of clever, interesting kind of layers within all his films, especially in Adaptation. And even like he didn't direct Adaptation or Being John Malkovich or Eternal Sunshine, but his voice is spread so far into those films. Like, yeah, they're by Spike Jonze and Michel Gondry respectively, and their styles definitely flow through their films. So I really feel Charlie Kaufman has a real like ownership and artistry within his screenplays. And I really feel like even though he didn't direct those bigger films that he's, you know, kind of known for, I really feel his voice really soars through those films in a very interesting way. And I just feel like it's kind of hard to do as just a screenwriter because some directors have their own unique style, and Spike Jonze and Michel Gondry definitely have that. But combined with Charlie Kaufman's voice, like his voice kind of commands a certain life of its own or a style of its own.
She hates me. She's disappointed. I could see it in her eyes when we met. I've got to stop sweating. Oh, she looked at my hairline. She thinks I'm bald. She's thinking I would never in a million years sleep with this guy.
We think you're great.
Oh, thanks. Wow, that's nice to hear.
Like, one thing that I like with the movie Adaptation, what I kind of liked about it is that, you know, how there's kind of like always a second layer going on with his films.
Oh, yeah.
Like with Adaptation, just like watching it, it's just like, it is one of the, it's like the movie watcher's movie, basically. Because it's like it's like, it's a story that's trying to be like the anti-movie movie. Yeah. Because you're getting this like meta text where like Charlie Kaufman, you know, he's insecure. He's, you know, trying to adapt a screenplay for this book that he has called The Orchard Thief. And it kind of just goes into like this meta commentary of like how the movie industry works and like trying to get a new project off the ground. And at the same time, Charlie Kaufman in Adaptation, he's like trying to fight to like create this like unconventional piece of art. And, you know, it's just like trying to adapt, you know, a screenplay for a book about flowers. It just seems so like convoluted and like almost impossible. And his like journey to try to like make that happen kind of like unfolds like the unconventional narrative of how the movie plays out in the beginning. And it's like in the backdrop, it's like Charlie Kaufman in Adaptation having like this existential crisis about himself and trying to and I would say I guess just jumping into the narrative, that's how it basically starts, is like Charlie Kaufman trying to get this Orchard Thief book adaptation off the ground with his screenplay and his struggles to write it. And that's like juxtaposed with his twin brother, who is just starting to get into like the movie writing business, when Charlie Kaufman has been at this for like decades. Yeah, and it's just really, I mean, it's really interesting kind of concept that's like the jumping off point of him trying to adapt this book. That's not really doesn't have like a traditional structure. He doesn't want, like he says in the film, he doesn't want to make it a Hollywood thing. He doesn't want to make it about an orchid heist or
kind of a sex, drugs, and, betrayal kind of a thing. Like, he wants to kind of be true to the true nature of the book, of the fascination of orchids and the kind of relationship between Susan Orlean and John LaRoche. And it's just like, I mean, with that, that's how the character's presenting what he wants to do with the scripts. And I'm sure it's similar to what Charlie Kaufman wanted to do, but then it kind of just, the movie kind of spirals a little out of control from there. There's like layers. There's so many layers, like, so many petals, like, with an orchid or a flower, you have the Charlie Kaufman trying to adapt a book, Charlie Kaufman's not so great relationship with his twin brother, who just wants to take the easy route. And that's something Charlie Kaufman's kind of against. He doesn't know how they share any DNA. And you got the story of Susan Orlean and John LaRoche and the whole story of the book. And then you have the kind of conversion, like the storylines kind of converge like within each other to a very kind of typical like Hollywood climactic ending that's very over the top and silly, but yet kind of heartful and very like genuine and honest, and kind of, there's a lot of beautiful like dialogue even within the kind of jokey over the top climax, especially between Charlie and Donald Kaufman. And Nicolas Cage really does a great job of kind of separating these different personalities and, just honing them into completely different characters, even though he's playing the same, he's both Charlie and Donald. I don't know, I love how the mixture of all these different layers, and it's just like, it's like a film within a film within a film within a film. There's just so many layers, and then there's the kind of existential thing that, Charlie Kaufman and Donald Kaufman and Susan Orlean are all kind of aspects of the character of Charlie Kaufman, or who Charlie Kaufman is. I really feel like, especially just coming off from being John Malkovich, this is a very ambitious way to kind of present the story. I feel like there's a lot of interesting things kind of behind the scenes. He wrote the draft. He thought it would ruin his career, but he wrote it like, how it pretty much is in the film. He sent it in, and Susan Orlean read it, and she agreed to it, but she didn't think like it would ever get off the ground, and it did, and it was pretty much a critical success, and it didn't really ruin Charlie Kaufman's career. It just kind of added to it. I mean, it probably wasn't his most like financially successful film, but I think it definitely brought him even further into the zeitgeist, or into the attention of being a very ambitious, insane kind of screenwriter. I feel like this kind of project fits Nicolas Cage very well, and that kind of dynamic between them is very interesting.
Yeah, I really liked the kind of dynamic that Nicolas Cage like presents between like Charlie Kaufman and Donald Kaufman. And how, Charlie Kaufman, as we said, he's trying to like create this unconventional narrative with this book for his screenplay. And, he's like talking about like, I have to pick a theme. I have to establish a narrative. And, the fact that he's like so self-conscious and like so self-aware, it completely works against him. Where it's like Donald Kaufman is he like you said, he just wants to like become like a screenwriter. He's not really worried about like how he's going to do it. He just wants to go ahead and do it. And I think it's funny too how like Donald Kaufman, as he's like trying to get into the whole like screenwriting world, he's talking about like taking a class, and like I'm going to do all of these different things in my screenplay. I want to have it be a crime drama, and his like excitement and ambitions kind of outstrip his abilities. And I just think that it's sort of like the inverse of Charlie Kaufman's like current cynicism with like how he views writing, and that he's struggling to like come up with something new and different, whereas like Donald, he's just like, I just want to do this like crime thing, and I want to do these like different arcs, and I want to stay within these like writing conventions that I'm learning in this class. And and I think it's kind of funny because I feel like Charlie Kaufman, he's like he's so like embarrassed and angry by Donald because he's like moving in this, he's doing like all of the like beginner's writing kind of like things that you would do. It's just like, I want to cover all these themes, I want to do this like crazy like narrative that doesn't make any sense. Like he wants to, like Donald, he describes like at one point, it's like, I want to do this thing where the bad guy and the good guy are like the same person, and that's the twist. But the good guy's the detective, so he's investigating himself. And then Charlie Kaufman is like, well, how is that going to happen if you have this one point in the story where there's a car chase? They can't just be in the same car chasing each other. They can't be they have to be two separate people. And he's like, Charlie Kaufman is like losing his mind trying to explain to Donald how that would not work. And Donald's like, oh no, dude, I'm going to totally fix it. It's going to totally work 100%. And Charlie is just like at a complete loss. It's just like, are you are you a fucking idiot? And it's just really like, I loved those scenes. And I think it's funny just like how just like Donald, he kind of like succumbs to like all the typical writer cliches that you do, like, which is something that I feel like any person who likes to write, that's something that you kind of have to do. You kind of have to force yourself through that. You kind of have to go through that process. And I think I like it because it's like Charlie Kaufman's frustrations are not necessarily with Donald, but it's like he's seen himself when he was first becoming a writer, and he's just like, I made those exact same mistakes, and now what if I'm making a big mistake trying to like adapt this book? And then there's like and I just feel like too, it's just like a meta criticism of like storytelling when Charlie Kaufman decides like, okay, I give up. I can't do this screenplay. I have to take this class that like Donald Kaufman is doing. So he sits in on the class, and I just feel like the whole class with, I can't remember the professor's name who runs it.
Robert McGee, who has the famous, I guess, infamous book on writing called Story.
Yeah, and it's like, it's such a...
which I haven't read, but I hear it. It's one that I've been meaning to read because I do like books on writing since I'm into screenwriting myself. So
yeah, and I just think it's funny how it just it kind of feels like it's almost giving credence to the idea of like you have to have a structured narrative in your story, but it's at the same time it's like criticizing, like typical writer conventions. And it's like the professor, he's like, he acts like such a dick.
He's such a stereotypical, like, this is what works.
And it's like, and you're a fucking asshole if you try to deviate. And it's like, and he's just like, Charlie Kaufman is just like sweating bullets while he's like watching this guy scream about, like, unconventional narratives, it's never gonna work, it's stupid. And it's like, how can you even call yourself a writer? And it's just like, it's such a dressing down of like Charlie's like ambitions, and it just feels I don't know, the fact that this movie can also be kind of be like construed as Charlie Kaufman's prolonged existential crisis with his career, like, resonated really deeply with me as someone who also likes to write.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I love films about writers or the craft of writing or filmmaking, those kind of meta aspects. And that happens to be my favorite scene of the film, where he's in the lecture and he's putting himself down in the voiceover. He's like, I am shit. I am pathetic. This is, worthless. And that's interrupted by one moment where McKee says, "God help you if you use voiceover narration in your screenplay."
Oh, I loved that.
Like calling it lazy. And I mean,
What is the substance of writing?
I have failed. I am panicked.
First,
I have sold out. I am worthless.
last,
What the fuck am I doing here? What the fuck am I doing here? Fuck. It is my weakness, my ultimate lack of conviction that brings me here. Easy answers, rules to shortcut yourself to success. And here I am, because my jaunt into the abyss brought me nothing. Well, isn't that just the risk one takes for attempting something new? I should leave here right now. I'll start over. I need to face this project head on
and God help you if you use voiceover in your work, my friends. God help you. It's flaccid, sloppy writing.
Sir, what if a writer is attempting to create a story where nothing much happens, where people don't change, they don't have any epiphanies, they struggle and are frustrated and nothing is resolved? More a reflection of the real world.
The real world?
Yes, sir.
The real fucking world. First of all, you write a screenplay without conflict or crisis, you'll bore your audience to tears. Secondly, nothing happens in the world? Are you out of your fucking mind? People are murdered every day. There's genocide, war, corruption. Every fucking day, somewhere in the world, somebody sacrifices his life to save somebody else. Every fucking day, someone somewhere takes a conscious decision to destroy someone else. People find love. People lose it. For Christ's sake, a child watches a mother beaten to death on the steps of a church. Someone goes hungry. Somebody else betrays his best friend for a woman. If you can't find that stuff in life, then you, my friend, don't know crap about life. And why the fuck are you wasting my 2 precious hours with your movie? I don't have any use for it. I don't have any bloody use for it.
Okay, thanks.
I kind of agree in some aspects. There's this new film on Netflix called The Devil All the Time, which uses voiceover it's narrated by the actual author of the book that's based on, but I feel like the voiceover in that film really kind of dragged it down for me, because a lot of the stuff that's narrated to explain kind of presented visually. I think with Charlie Kaufman, I think he knows how to use voiceover well as more of like an introspective of the character. And I feel like in all his films that I've seen, he does use a lot of voiceover. Maybe not so much in Being John Malkovich, but like Eternal Sunshine Adaptation and I'm thinking of Ending Things, there's definitely heavier on the voiceover. I feel like he does it well. Like I love getting like a introspection into the character's thoughts and what's driving them. It's not like explaining the plot. It's more just like giving an insight into their perspective or their negativity or what they're struggling with. That's not just presented visually. And I feel like he does a really good job. I love the kind of meta kind of joke aspect of even in the end of the film, where he wants to end it on narration, and he says, McKee says it's not good to use voiceover, but fuck it, it feels right. Sometimes I feel like Charlie Kaufman's very much a supporter of writing into the unknown and just, throwing out the rule book as he's kind of presented in his character. His character within Adaptation is kind of presented that way. I feel like there's a good balance between both. There's good things to take from narrative structure, but you should also not let that pigeonhole you from expressing yourself in the way you want to present your stories or whatever. So I find that it's a very interesting kind of balance the film presents within those two things.
Definitely. And I think with one thing that was like, I got so into into like the way the story was like playing out, just like out of order, where you're getting like the bits and pieces of Susan Orlean and John LaRoche and their interactions with each other, combined with like Charlie Kaufman, trying to, adapt the story that Susan and John are like going through, and how it was just sort of like, it was so like all over the place in terms of like timeline that it kind of actually felt a little disconcerting when like I think like the last like fourth of the film, it actually like refocuses and it actually turns into like a streamlined narrative where like the two, where like Charlie and Donald Kaufman, you know, converge on the real Susan Orlean and John LaRoche, and how that kind of like ties everything up, and how it just sort of, instead of watching sort of like this like avant-garde kind of film that's like a criticism or like a meta commentary on writing film and filmmaking, and then it just turns into like a conventional type like thriller slash almost like mystery, you know, type movie. It almost like I was slightly disappointed how it kind of went in that direction, because I was just like, I was kind of like already sort of enjoying like the craziness of like how the film was structured. I think if we had to talk about favorite scenes, one of my favorites is like when Charlie Kaufman has that like bit of inspiration and he turns on his recorder and he's like, you know, we're starting with like the universe beginning and, you know, the earth being made, and you get this like montage of like, you know, the earth being made, volcanoes, the dinosaurs, you get like the forests, you see like an animal die and decompose, and it's like done in this like time-lapse video, and then it just goes all the way to like Charlie Kaufman's birth, and then you get this flash and he's like back in his like room, and he's just like, God, that was so great, how do I get that in a script? And he just like he's back to his like the same cycle of frustration of, you know, trying to get this thing written.
Yeah, I mean, and I can understand that. And the film structure is very interesting in that aspect. It's somewhat experimental. And I feel like when it devolves into the traditional, like, climactic third act, I think that's more of just a commentary of kind of making fun of itself. It's kind of very absurd. He turns Susan Orlean into this kind of risque drug addict who is sleeping with her like subject, who's very has questionable morals. Like, he kind of turns her around and kind of forces a conflict within the characters that kind of comes out of nowhere, but I feel like that's part of the meta aspect, and that it's kind of hilarious in a way of how it's presented. And, you know, like, he's looking for this, like, you know, I think when Donald's helping him with his script, you know, he says that it's missing something, and then all this stuff kind of just comes out of nowhere, you know, like John LaRoche and Susan Orlean are suddenly in an affair, and, you know, she's doing drugs, she's posing for his porn site, and it just gets kind of off the rails, but it's a very entertaining, and I'm a sucker for a good thriller and a good like climax, even though it's kind of poking fun at that thing. I think it's done interestingly well, and it's pretty humorous. I mean, I've seen the film so many times I can't even count, but just the way they catch him spying on them, and then John LaRoche is like, "Oh, it's good to meet you. Who's going to play me in the movie?" You know, it's just like all these really absurd things, and they talk about they need to kill him. You know, he can't see me. He's going to expose what we're doing. It's just, I don't know. There's just so many funny, hilarious, absurd layers to it that I really feel like it's kind of meta in that aspect. Basically.
Yeah,
it's hilarious.
That was like really insane. Like, I really like. There was a part of me who just thought like, okay, like a part of me wanted to believe that like Charlie and Donald Kaufman, it's like they created the story or the movie as they were going, and it was just sort of the characters became like what they wrote. So it was sort of, so I kind of assumed that it was, you know, they've like gone through this like weird like rabbit hole, or they're through the looking glass, and now they're interacting with the characters that they've created, that Charlie Kaufman and Donald have created together. Because, I mean, honestly,
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
someone like John LaRoche, like, who can really, like, come up with a character like that who's, like, this hippie con artist who is missing, like, all the teeth in his, like, upper jawline. He just looks like a reverse Dracula with, like,
Yeah.
the gums, and it's just, like, so, like, I've never seen Chris Cooper looking so gross in a movie.
Oh, yeah.
It's really
He
unbelievable.
owns it. Yeah, he fucking owns it like hard. But yeah, like it kind of starts off like a typical like Charlie Kaufman kind of weird structure, and then turns into The Three, which is the Donald Kaufman script. You know, it kind of turns into that weird kind of thriller where things like insane kind of happen, but still has like a heart and genuineness to it. I feel like when Charlie and Donald are kind of hiding in the swamp, and you know, Donald kind of has that monologue, which is would be kind of cheesy in the typical like Hollywood film, but I really feel like there's a very kind of beautiful vulnerability to it, you know, where like he says, I know they were laughing at me, but you know, I loved her and it was mine, you know, you are what you love, not what loves you, or whatever. I don't know. I feel like lines like that really hiding up the world, or the I don't know, maybe I'm not thinking of the right phrase, but you're really hiding up the intensity and of the film. It's just so many different things all at once, you know, like it's a literal adaptation, you know, it kind of just grows within itself to become something new or something different, if that makes sense. I'm not sure. I'm kind of just blabbing on.
I mean, there's a lot of things that these characters love in that movie. And for Suzanne, it does eventually become the green herb cocaine thing that she like snorts up at the end.
Yeah, but she wants to be fascinated by. She wants to know what's so fascinating about it. You know, she wants to find that. That's the whole heart of her story, is to try to find what John finds so fascinating about this, and she does in her own like weird way. I'm not sure that's how it kind of goes. I haven't read the book. I don't know much about it. I've watched and read interviews with Susan Orlean about the film of Adaptation, but as far as the book, I don't think it devolves into her becoming a drug addict and, you know, posing for his porn site or anything. But I feel like
a part of me doubts it. A part of yeah, I don't know if it kind of makes me wonder. Like, I haven't really read the book myself, but it kind of makes me wonder. It's like, did she sign off on this when they were doing this?
Yeah. Well, she did, but she also didn't think it would ever go anywhere. And Charlie Kaufman thought his career would be over, but it wasn't. You know, he went off and he wrote Eternal Sunshine, and he won an Oscar for that film. And you know, he's even though he hasn't made like a lot of films on his own, I feel like he's very, you know, he's very renowned for being a really crazy storyteller, but in a way that's he has these really just bizarre like concepts in this film, whether it's traveling into a portal in someone's head, or you know, writing himself into an adaptation of a book about orchids, or a film about losing memory of loved ones, and so on and so on. You know, he has these really obscure, very absurd kind of concepts, but he really hones them down. There's like humanity to them, and that's always my biggest takeaway in any of his films I see. There's this raw humanity within these really crazy, insane, absurd kind of outer worldly concepts that you would find just absurd, but he does it in the very way that he kind of hones in on that kind of primal humanity and that emotion, and that's just what I love about his work so much.
Well, dude, he should just try to commit career suicide more often, because this is like, I mean, seriously, you know, get another one of those movies in. I'd be totally down for it.
Well, I mean, in that case, I would highly recommend I'm Thinking of Ending Things, because that is another absurd. That's based on a book as well, but he kind of goes his own way with it. Not where he writes himself into the story, but kind of does so many abstractions within that. And I feel like Adaptation is, I mean, I think he's a writer and filmmaker who's always on top of his game. But I feel like Adaptation has him like on top in such a way that's very unique that I haven't really seen in many other films. I mean, all his films are very unique, but I feel like Adaptation just kind of took it to a very extreme step, especially from his first like big success of being John Malkovich. There's not more praise I can say about him. It's just. He's an amazing artist. Adaptation is an amazing commentary on writing and adapting and forming into different things and poking fun and criticizing the format of screenwriting and how it's kind of a factory machine at this point of Hollywood, especially for the time back in 2002 when the film came out. It was a very like kind of a culture shock, I feel, to the world of film, but it was still up there with the likes of so many different films for like Academy Awards and things like that. So, he has staked his claim on the world of cinema. I can't say enough. I can't say enough about him. It's my words aren't doing him justice, but I think I love the guy. I love his work, and I feel Adaptation is just an amazing, unique film. I don't feel like people aren't as familiar with like Being John Malkovich or Eternal Sunshine. I feel like that's kind of the black sheep or the more obscure kind of Charlie Kaufman film. But it is getting a new Blu-ray release pretty soon, later this month in October. So hopefully maybe get it on Netflix or readily available on Amazon so more people can see it, because I feel like it's a very important film, and I feel like people should go into it with an open mind for sure and experience it in their own way, because I feel like everyone can get their own like meaning interpretation from the themes and things like that. So
well, I'm glad you recommended this one, because honestly this was actually a movie I've been putting off for like several years. So, this was a good excuse as any to sit down and watch it, and I'm glad I did, because really it just kind of, it makes me appreciate it makes me appreciate Nicolas Cage a lot more as an actor, but it also just kind of like upsets me a great deal, because it's like he could be doing like so much better work, and it's like, why do you have to like go star in like Kick-Ass 2 or something? Or like The Vampire's Kiss. I don't know. I'll definitely.
Vampire's Kiss. That's kind of an older one, right? That's from like the 80s.
Yeah, but I'll definitely like, now I kind of want to check out, now that I've seen this one, I kind of want to check out Mandy, and he's got another. He's got another movie coming out this year that's based on like an H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah, The Color of Space or whatever. Yeah, I think that's been out. I mean, I'm not sure if it was this year or last year, but I haven't seen it yet. Mandy is a weird, trippy film, but it's also very fun. It's not like, I don't think it's not like Adaptation level for me, but it's really enjoyable, and it's not just Nicolas Cage. I think the actress who plays the titular character, Mandy, is very great, and it's very horrifying. It makes a good kind of a horror film, kind of a horror revenge type film about Satanists and murder and revenge. It's good though. I think Nicolas Cage has a lot of raw primal emotion in that one, and he definitely presents. The film's presented in a very unique way, and I think I consider it like a good Nicolas Cage film, one that we haven't seen him do in such a long time. Like, when he does a very unique premise, I feel that's when he really like just shines and does really great work, and it's not just a generic thriller like The Three. I mean, The Three, and the way Donald describes it sounds like a really bad Nicolas Cage generic kind of movie that you could find on Netflix or something. But I just love, there's like a chase between horses and vehicles. I want to have a commentary on industrialized vehicles and horses.
Oh yeah, it's just like man versus machine. I mean, they did it in Terminator. I can do it in this one.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just hilarious. It sounds such like a Nicolas Cage film. I don't know if that was something on Charlie Kaufman's part. I don't know if he envisioned Nicolas Cage for the role, but I think that's just so hilarious. And just those are some of my other favorite scenes. Those scenes between Donald and Charlie, and how they kind of how they kind of interact with each other, and how he kind of looks down on Donald. And I mean, even the character Charlie Kaufman within this, film has his own kind of arc. He kind of steps out of his comfort zone. He makes a move on his friend who he has a crush on, and he kind of becomes at peace with himself after Donald's death, and the two kind of become one. Because obviously Donald Kaufman is a fictional character. Charlie Kaufman doesn't really have a twin or anything. So even though he says in the credits, at the end it says "in loving memory of Donald Kaufman," but that's kind of the end joke of it all. So
yeah, that movie almost convinced me that he did have a twin. So.
Yeah, I did at first until I kind of I said, oh, okay. Even when he was nominated for screenplay, it said he credits Donald Kaufman in the screenplay, which is kind of weird and funny. It's the first time a fictional character has been nominated for like an Oscar. So
that was before you could really use Google to like catch somebody on a lie.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's like there's more. That's one good thing about the more absence of technology not being a big part of our lives. It's the mystery of things could be mysteries, and now we know like Disney will like put everything on the table with their films. Like, don't worry guys, it's going to have this and this. People know like, ooh, this person's returning for this movie in this role. It's been reported by Variety or IndieWire or whatever. It's just, I don't know. A lot of mystery in movie making's kind of gone now. It's all just on the table. If your film's a big blockbuster, but I guess no one really, it doesn't ruin the experience for most people. Obviously, financially, those movies, are very successful. So,
right on.
So, what was your biggest takeaway from Adaptation? What was or your initial reaction? Like, what were your first kind of feelings, and what would you rate the film?
I would say my initial reaction was I would say like it was kind of like I saw something like really interesting, and it was just sort of like I kind of wanted to see it a second time because I felt like I'd missed something, and it wasn't. And for me, it was just it was a really kind of, it was the kind of sort of like avant-garde, like unconventional film that didn't feel too pretentious or didn't feel like super convoluted, complicated, that it was trying to like outsmart me as I was watching it, and just taking it all in, the story and the narrative. It was a really rewarding movie experience, and I would give it like a 9 out of 10. Okay. That's I think with and to me it was just like Nicolas Cage's performance was like so surprisingly good, and that was like probably the biggest like positive surprise for me. Because you kind of expect Gary Cooper and Meryl Streep to turn in like Chris Cooper. You expect those two to turn in a top-notch performance when they're starring in something. I kind of had low expectations for Nicolas Cage, but he really knocked this one out of the park. Yeah. So I like it.
He definitely he went to their level. I feel like the three of them really did so many great like performances, even if the third act climax, is kind of goofy and kind of poking fun of itself at the same time. I mean, the whole cast is great, even this like smaller roles. Brian Cox as Robert McKee, I feel, is really a standout for me as well. I love the scenes with him and Nicolas Cage, even in the bar when they're talking about how to fix the script, and You got Maggie Gyllenhaal as Donald's girlfriend. She was really great. You got Judy Greer as the waitress, and you have that awkward scene where he tries to ask her out, and it just gets so like painfully awkward. I feel like they did a good job at capturing Charlie Kaufman's awkwardness and kind of self-loathing. I feel like that's definitely a part of who he is in reality.
That was absolute cringe. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just, oh my God. Like, oh, you know, I mean, I definitely have been not like situations where I'd want to ask like a cute waitress out, but I don't because I'm too scared of the consequences or just the awkward feeling. And that definitely he captures awkwardness and cringe very well, as you can see in some of his other films. And, you know, you have like, they recreated the sets, I think, for being John Malkovich because, you know, it kind of takes place when he's filming that. You know, you get John Cusack, Catherine Keener, and John Malkovich in little bits here and there. And Ron Livingston, who plays like the kind of gross agent, who's famously known from Office Space. He is pretty good too. I mean, the whole cast, even their more smaller roles, are great. But yeah, my biggest takeaway is just I love that it's a film about writing and transforming storytelling. That's my biggest takeaway from it. You know, especially when I'm writing, I don't know about you, but I always get very insecure about if it's working or if I'm being true to myself, if I'm being genuine, or if I'm just too influenced by other like media or other things or how they're supposed to be, if I'm just a fraud trying to write something. And I get those bouts of insecurity when I'm writing something. I think that's just part of the process, at least for me. But yeah, I really connected with those aspects a lot of his constant like narration in his mind that's kind of, you know, breaking himself down more and more, negativity and things like that.
Yeah, amen to that. I totally get it.
Yeah. And I would give the film a perfect score of 5 out of 5 stars for me. I mean, there's some pacing stuff here and there that kind of stuff when it goes into Susan Orlean and John LaRoche, it kind of slows down a bit. It's still interesting though, and I wouldn't like really fault the film too much for it. But if I had to point out one maybe criticism, that would be it. I think the film as a whole is really great. I think it's just an amazing enigma of a film. So that's my rating. Do you have any other final thoughts on the adaptation you want to add, or?
Really, Nicolas Cage should just try to star in more Charlie Kaufman films. He needs to get back on the horse.
They should get back together for sure. Nicolas Cage, you know, he's done some good stuff. I mean, he's worked with David Lynch and Wild at Heart and Coppola and a lot of other great filmmakers. So he's capable. It's just sometimes maybe not the best projects come his way, and he just ends up doing kind of generic schlock for the most part. But hey, I think in even the worst Nicolas Cage film, I feel like there's something entertaining, even if it's an over-the-top kind of a performance. But yeah, this will definitely be an ongoing thing with this podcast, I hope. I want to recommend more Nicolas Cage films, even the bad ones. I definitely would love to do Face Off and Con Air at some point. And just try to dig, through the Nicolas Cage massive filmography and find those little hilarious diamonds in the rough. So yeah, that's going to be our thoughts on Adaptation, and I hope you either watched it or will consider checking it out after you listen to this podcast. But we come to the point toward the end of the episode where one of us recommends a film or films, and this time it is Phil's turn. And so, Phil, what are we going to be checking out in the next episode of the Cinema Enigma podcast?
Well, you know what? It's Halloween's coming.
Ooh,
yeah,
spooky.
That's right. We're going to be picking out our candy. We're going to be holed up inside the house,
Ooh.
and we're going to be sitting down. We're going to be watching Francis Coppola's Dracula with Keanu Reeves' famous British accent. Are you ready?
Well,
I'm ready.
Yeah, I'm excited because I've actually never seen the Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula. I remember when it came out as a kid, and not being able to see it because I was too young. I've heard of Keanu Reeves' infamous performance. Of course, that's Gary Oldman as Dracula, I believe.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Oh, cool. Awesome. And I think it has a good all-star cast, and I am very much looking forward to finally seeing this because it's been on my radar for most of my life, and I don't know why I've never seen it. With Halloween, it's usually like the Halloween or Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street, kind of, those are the typical picks, whether it's podcasts or, reviews or, or Twitter threads or whatever. I feel like, let's try to bring Dracula back in a good Dracula film and not like Dracula 2000 or Dracula Untold. Or at least an interesting one. I don't know if I'll like it or not, but we shall see in the next episode.
I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning into this third episode of the Cinema Namgo podcast. We have a lot of fun doing it, and the fan reaction and feedback's been really great. You can find our podcast on Spotify and iTunes, and YouTube as well, or wherever you're listening to this podcast. If you can, leave us a good review. Follow us on Twitter at Cinema Enigma. And that's going to do it for our show. So until next time, the stars will be with you in the court of Dracula. I don't know.
I love it.
I don't know what
I
I'm
love
saying.
it.
Yeah, we'll have to come up with a cool sign off. But we'll let us know how that sign off is in comments or shout us out on Twitter. All right, anyways, until next time, guys, thank you for stopping by, and we'll see you in episode 4. Check you later.
See you next time. Bye-bye.